Radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
All right, welcome, Fade to Black. And now, today is Tuesday, January 23rd, 2024. I'm your host, Jimmy Church, and I sound a little I'm texting with a friend of mine that most of you know, going back and forth right up to showtime. And so that's why I was 15 seconds late in starting the show tonight. I've never been 15 seconds late, and I'm continuing to text now. It's fun. But you know what? This is my world. I can do what I want. How is everybody doing tonight? Well, an amazing week this week on Fade to Black. And, last night, Mary Rodwell was on with us. She was absolutely amazing. Tonight, you get a special treat. Whitley Strieber is with us, and Whitley and I tonight are going to FaceTime with each other. So I normally would say that Fade to Black is a broadcast where you get to just hang out with my guest, and it's just like being there, and we're all fat. Well, tonight it's really going to be just like that with Whitley. Whitley's coming up here in just a minute. And tomorrow night, William Henry is here. And then Thursday night, Sarah Breskman Cosme. That is an amazing week here on Fade to Black. And I want to remind everybody about Thursday night's show. I was regressed. And I was regressed live on camera in studio for my television show. And parts of that regression have aired, and you can go and check out that current episode and with Sarah Breskman Cosme. What I have is I have all of the footage from said regression session, and yeah. So I'm going to go through it and show some exclusive moments of that session and talk through that with Sarah on Thursday night. That's a very special show. Sarah is with us on Thursday. And I know that I've said many times over the years, I would never do regression. I would never do the therapy. And I just want to leave things alone. Well, I chose to do it. And I did it with Sarah. And so Thursday night is going to be a very special show, a personal show. And, it's like running around the streets naked. That's what it is. You just leave it all out there. And we are going to do that on Thursday night. But tonight it's Whitley Strieber. And I've called this show, this is my idea. I didn't even tell Whitley, by the way, but he's going to find out right now. This is Dreamland on Fade to Black. It's an honor and a privilege to be able to say something like that. Whitley is with us. Of course, he is the author of over 40 works of both fiction and nonfiction. His books include The Wolfen, The Hunger, Communion, The Coming Global Superstorm, which was, as we know, The Day After Tomorrow. And they were all made into films. His sci-fi series, Alien Hunter, became the SyFy Channel series Hunter. We all know about what happened in 1985. We may touch upon some of that tonight. We may talk a little bit about Communion, but I've got other plans for Whitley. His website, unknowncountry.com, is among the largest in the world dealing with paranormal phenomena, and his podcast, Dreamland, has been produced weekly for 20 years. I believe it was a podcast before podcast was a word. I would like to welcome back to Fade to Black, the one and only Whitley Strieber. So Whitley, Dreamland was a podcast before podcast was a word. You know that.
Yeah, and it's 25 years, sadly enough, Jimmy, not 20. Yeah, it was. Well, what happened was we were on Clear Channel, and on Saturday nights, first Sunday nights, and then Saturday nights, and then they took it off the air, and I thought, what am I going to do? I'll try doing this on the internet and see what happens. And I was certainly one of the first. And what happened was 25 years later, it's a very successful podcast, and I'm still here.
You know, I know that I've talked to you about this before, but I'm going to say this. When I discovered Dreamland back in the day, and I would sit and listen. It was about, you had great guests and things, and it was great subjects and all of that. But you know what I really dug, Whitley, is you have a way of making somebody very comfortable, and you guys would just, gals, would just do these fireside chats. I just felt like I would just hang out. It was, and I just spent so much time and learned so much, and I wouldn't have done it if I wasn't able to just, focus and be comfortable. So yeah, man, you taught me a lot.
Well, thank you. I try to make my guests comfortable because it's not about challenging the guest. It's called Dreamland for a reason. And when Art and Ramona first dreamed the show up, the idea was it would be a show where we would encourage the guests to say their piece. And that would be the idea, and still is.
Well, here, you're going to be at Conscious Life Expo again this February. I cannot wait to hang out with you again this year, and we'll circle back to that. I wanted to ask you this because we have some semi-breaking news, and I've been reading about it and hearing about it, and for about a year now, and I've done a few shows on this, but it seems that the James Webb Space Telescope, and I'm reading right here in this is, we're talking about mainstream. This is Ars Technica, that's about as mainstream as it gets. And The Bite, futurism.com, a series of articles about the James Webb Space Telescope and some of the scientists that are working there who are starting to disclose some chatter. I had heard about this about a year ago, that they are now very close to making an announcement of biological evidence. Now, that's pushing, you know what I mean? That is just like taking this to a whole nother level. We always knew, that the universe is a big place, and there's got to be lots of stuff going on out there. But our community talking about it is one thing, but this is a whole nother type of chatter. Does it surprise you if this announcement happens that it would come from the scientific community and not the military and not Whitley Strieber?
Well, first of all, there's a lot going on behind the scenes, and we'll see what they actually say when the papers are published. There's a paper I know of that's in peer review right now. Whether or not that will survive intact, I don't know, but we'll see. But hopefully it's going to come out, and I think there might be some pushback from here and there in the Defense Department on the theory that if the public is told that there is life anywhere out there, then that is going to increase pressure on them and they've got secrets they feel they have to keep. So we don't know exactly what will happen, but let's hope for the best.
Well, what about the announcement. I mean, so many are expecting. If something like this happens, I think there's expectations of a head of state going live on TV, and
yeah, there is. That's absolutely correct.
But to have this come from the scientific community first kind of reminds me of the movie Contact. And that's the part that I'm a little surprised about. But then again, it kind of makes sense, doesn't it?
It does. Whether or not the head of state or the U.S. president will go on live TV to talk about this is one of the questions, because the administration has been pushing back against congressional efforts to open this stuff up a little bit more. And the reason being that they've got a lot of skin in the game, and a lot of people in the intelligence community absolutely do not want this stuff to come out. And it's not because, and in the defense industry especially, it's not because they're hiding some massive secret that we mustn't know about ourselves. It's much more about the fact that the question of whether or not the processes and things that have been developed based on what's been found were patentable at all, and who owns what, and whether or not federal procurement rules and the bidding rules were followed, because a lot of this material was farmed out to companies that were in the secret, already had a classified track inside the company. And I talk about this in my new book, in Them. And the problem is that there's an enormous amount of money involved, because there's a lot of processes that and other things that have ended up in the public space in use that come from these discoveries. And I'm not talking about Velcro. There's much more, or nitinol, or any of those sort of things. There's much more down to earth stuff that we have. Super hard metals, for example, and super light, super hard metals have been, and coatings like radar absorbing coatings and things like that, and lots of other things, transmission systems and other things. There's quite a bit that I know of, and I'm sure there's even more that I don't know of, but enormous amounts of money are involved. And some of these companies, I think, fear that they will be on the hook, that they will be revealed to have broken the law, and therefore their competitors will be able to sue them. And they don't want that to happen, so they push back. And then there's a strain, but it's a significant strain in the community of religious people who believe that you should ignore demons. And this isn't so important as it was at once, but one of the reasons that it was originally classified, or stayed classified after they figured out that they had bodies and so forth, was that some of the gestalt of these beings was so terrifying that they thought they must be demons, and that demons should be ignored. And so otherwise they will insinuate themselves into your life. And there was a paper apparently written, a classified paper, I think by John von Neumann, the cyberneticist and expert on quantum physics, back in the early 50s, supposedly in 1952. And I'm not sure of any of this, but this paper theorized that if someone else with a more vital and a stronger vision of the world than we had, a more true vision of the world than we had, came into our context their vision of the world might conceivably literally change the way things are for us and send us into a state of confusion. And I have to say that some of the experiences I've had with the visitors have suggested that would not be true, but not all of them. Some of them have suggested that there might be some very profound changes in the way we really see the world if we were completely enveloped in their reality.
Yeah, there's no question about that. And let's stay with this for a second if we can.
Sure.
Because von Neumann spent him and his buddies now, it wasn't just him. Those physicists would sit around and the Fermi paradox, for example, that surfaced because of physicists sitting around talking about ET and UFOs and flying saucers in the universe, and these are big minds and big thinkers. And von Neumann spent a lot of time on not only these ideas but the implications of that. And one of the thought experiments that he put out there was what is now popularly called the von Neumann probe. And he postulated, Whitley, as you know, that once you get to a certain technical level and wondering about your neighbors, you would then develop self-replicating probes that would go and maybe land on a factory, a factory probe would land on an asteroid, mine the resources of the asteroid, and manufacture these probes that would continue to populate the galaxy and star systems and continue to replicate and continue to go out and explore. Now that's an extraordinary idea for 1955, right?
Well,
but
the von Neumann machine is his concept of the von Neumann machine was a machine that replicated an entire species in all the whole species. It replicated everything about it and could reproduce it, and that could be sent out to populate planets that were congenial to that species. But what if it arrived at a planet that was congenial to that species, but already had someone living there? Was it programmed for that? And also another thing that he talks about in the paper that he wrote about this, one of them is degradation, and that the idea being that the content of it would degrade over time. So if it went around for hundreds of thousands of years until it found a planet, it might be that what it could produce of the original species would not be as fully viable as it had been when it originally left. And he tried to calculate a rate of degradation to see when a thing like that might actually die. But of course, he didn't have access to the kind of materials knowledge that we have now. So it was just guesswork. Like actually the Fermi paradox is just guesswork. And incidentally, that's always pointed to by the scientific community. But some of the people who were sitting at that table at that lunch must have known what was really going on. So I always think that the Fermi paradox might be something of a cover-up.
Yeah, well, to think that Fermi, the timing of that was pinned down to 1952 at a cafeteria in Los Alamos.
Right.
And so 1952 Los Alamos, there was a lot going on. Well, Roswell was just 5 years before that. That's one thing. But
and
right
a lot of the materials were at Los Alamos.
That's right.
And the secrecy, the extreme secrecy was just being decided upon then.
And Los Alamos at that time was having issues with these glowing green craft that were coming in groups and hovering over Los Alamos. So much so that they built 3 radar stations so they could triangulate and pinpoint the location of these craft. So it wasn't, it wasn't like Fermi and his buddies. I think Edward Teller was sitting there, right? That they weren't just sitting around talking about this just because. No, there was reasons to have this discussion. You're exactly right, Whitley.
Yeah, exactly.
And so staying on this, going back to von Neumann, the ideas that he brought forward in the 50s absolutely are happening today. 3D printing, the talk of 3D printing cities on Mars, or whatever it is. Those concepts are exactly these are our plans to move forward with the exploration of space. It's incredible when you think about it.
Well, yeah, exactly. And these were people. Some of these people were living double lives. One life, they were in the normal world, and there'd never been any suggestion of anyone here except us. In another life, they were frantically trying to figure out what was going on, because the bodies were incomplete, like General Exon said a long time ago to me. They petered out. In other words, you'd have an esophagus that didn't go all the way down, and a mouth that could not eat. It could only ingest liquids. And what were they? And I think to myself, when I heard that, I thought to myself, maybe von Neumann was right and the machine was just too old. And what it has created here isn't viable. And that could be part of the problem. That could explain its interest in our genetic material. They may be trying to fix themselves. They may know they don't work right, and they're trying to fix themselves.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. And what von Neumann said, and he put it 2 different ways. One, he tied it to DNA, and second, he tied it to the machines themselves that would be building other machines. That one little mistake in the DNA over great lengths of time would manifest into a big problem. One little chink in the armor, one little thing wrong with any of the machines that are doing this work, as they build themselves over time, the next thing you know, you've got a 3-legged probe instead of a 4-legged probe landing.
Exactly. And you've got somebody with immense intellectual knowledge, but who knows that they can't reproduce.
Exactly.
Or someone who is brilliant but deranged.
Kind of like this show.
Like the whole world. I mean, mankind, I have learned, having spent most of my life now with the visitors in my life, that we're really smart. Mankind, human beings, don't ever sell ourselves short. This is a very smart bunch of cookies here on this planet. And that's probably why we screwed it up so badly. We've got too many ideas and we compete with each other too much. What is obvious to one person as a good idea seems to another person to be the worst possible idea. And we're very creative, too creative.
Isn't it interesting how you and I can have a conversation about these very deep, philosophical with existential influences, and then drive a conversation into a result and questions that's a fact that we are able to do that, to talk about the micro all the way to the edges of the universe and to think about everything in between. That is amazing. I mean,
yes. It is amazing. It's absolutely amazing, because we can do so much with our minds. They're very supple. and they're very creative. And a measure of I've always thought a measure of intelligence is the need for story. And if you go on you go on the internet now, and you see an absolutely incredible amount of entertainment beyond anything that anyone could have imagined even 10 years ago. And guess what? It's supporting itself. A lot of those shows are watched. And that's because there are just so many people who need entertainment. Or go into a bookstore. There were 200 new bookstores were created in the United States last year. And so people are still reading. They're streaming, they're going out to shows. They are hungry for entertainment. And the more information that comes into the human mind, the more entertainment it needs, because it needs refuge from that information flood. I always think to myself, the panjandrums of the internet need to understand that in order to make their money on their shows, they need to flood the internet with so much information that people can't resist finding out about, that they're going to become desperate to get away from it and go to the shows to watch. So,
one of the oldest sayings, but the cream rises to the top, right?
yes.
So the good stuff does, bubble to the surface, but you do have to walk through the cornfield of weeds to get to some of it, for sure. But the idea of what a story is, okay, that I think when people say, well, what separates us from apes? What separates us from cats? What separates us from whales and dolphins and whatever? You know what? A lot. But the big one is the story.
I think that's very, very astute of you, Jimmy. I think you hit the nail on the head.
It is so crazy that we have that ability. And you know what? Not only to tell the story, but then you have to listen. So we are listening to the story, right? It's a yin yang, it's a give and take, and that really separates us from everything. Is the story?
Yeah, I think you're quite right. Of course, the cetaceans might be telling stories with their when they vocalize. You don't know what they're doing, but it's true that in the land animals, the only storyteller is us, and the gulf between us and the next smartest animal is absolutely remarkable. It's fantastic.
And considering it's only like 2 genes, right?
It's very strange. It's very strange. And one of the things that has not been done that should be done, or hasn't been done to a really serious level of scientific finish, is to get out there and try to figure out whether or not we are chimeras, whether or not we are something that there are elements of design in our genetic history, points in our genetic history where there could have been a designer, someone who came in and changed our genetics, and that those signatures should be there, and we should be able to find them, but nobody really wants to look at that.
Nobody wants that answer.
The thing is, you can't get grants. If you try to go get a grant to examine the human genome for signs of artificial interference, forget it. You're not going to get that grant, and it's just because it's too far outside of the accepted store of knowledge, and that's unfortunate because you can't. I know scientists who would love to do that work. I had breakfast with one a couple weeks ago who would just love to do that work and thinks he might really find some extraordinary things. but he can't get a grant, and he can't dare to go to his university and say and write a paper attempting to get support from other members of his community, because they'll all look down their noses at him, and he'd never get a successful peer review of a paper like that.
Can you imagine the National Science Foundation, right? And they're like this. They got the paper. They got your paper, and they're going, okay, so welcome. Okay, so we're reviewing this. Okay, so you need $1 million so you can hire a staff to do the research on genetic manipulation by the Anunnaki in our chromosomes 200,000 years ago.
Yeah, it's not gonna fly. Yeah. Let's face it.
So who are the Anunnaki? What happened? And you're absolutely right. The evidence.
Something's wrong. Something is wrong with the way we think about the past. It's obvious now. I mean, Clovis. It used to be that people's careers were destroyed for not believing that the Clovis people were the first Americans, and now it's the same people who ran around throwing other people out of universities and denying them tenure are saying, "Oh, we always knew it wasn't really and it's just awful the way that sort of thing happens." And we look at all these engineering feats in the past, and you look at Nan Madol in the Carolinas, all these huge basalt logs that were piled up one on another in order to make artificial islands. And there's hundreds of them there, thousands, and they're immensely heavy, every one of them. And if you look in the National Geographic's explanation for this, they say the Polynesians brought them on boats, on canoes. Now, come on. Any engineer is going to tell you immediately that you'd need a 500-foot-long canoe to even think about bringing one of these things, and probably you would not have timbers sufficiently strong to hold together with that weight.
The displacement, I don't want to get too far off into this, because if we do, I'm going to keep you on the air for about 8 hours, because this is one of the most important points that we're smarter today than we were 50 years ago. We were fed the dogma 50 years ago, 60 years ago, 40 years ago. We didn't have research. Today, we are smarter. And when you look at not only places in Polynesia, in Vietnam, Cambodia, Peru, Mexico, Egypt, it doesn't matter where you go. It's the same story. These structures, these megalithic stones, are huge. They are as big as a house, and they weigh hundreds of tons. How did they get from here to there? Forget about the mining, forget about the carving, forget about that. How did they transport it? Because there were no ships big enough to have that kind of displacement. Do you know what kind of boat you would have to have today to put 100-ton stone block on? What kind of displacement we're talking about? Those ships didn't exist. As a matter of fact, Whitley, they didn't have the wheel, right? They didn't even have
well, so, when Baalbek the platform at Baalbek was built. Now, if you look in the archaeology books, they'll say it was built by the Romans, and that's all well and good. The problem is this: there is nothing between the quarry and the Baalbek platforms to explain how those stones were moved. Specifically, there's no foundational structure under the soil, and the soil is not hard enough by any means to support them. Therefore, something else was done. And it's just one thing. Sacsayhuaman, as you say, it's one thing after another. But here's the most interesting thing about it. If you look around carefully, Göbekli Tepe is a perfect example. You look at that enormous effort that was made, and you can't find any supporting social infrastructure anywhere. We're forced to say, well, it must have been made by hunter-gatherers. But what if it's not that? What if it's made by somebody who left, who came and left, taking their, like in all of Egypt, we don't see a single tool that can explain a great deal of the engineering and even the decorative pottery of ancient Egypt is inexplicable, and there's no tools left. You don't find any tools. You don't find any representations of tools anywhere. And in all those hundreds or thousands of years, nobody decided to represent a tool. And when hieroglyphics began to be constructed, why weren't tools included in the story that was being made with hieroglyphics? All kinds of objects are in hieroglyphics, but not tools. Is it that they didn't have tools as we understand them? There was some other way they used to build things, maybe with their minds. Who knows what the heck? But we don't understand ourselves, and we don't understand our past.
Not at all. Not at all. I was with an archaeologist, professional archaeologist in Peru a couple of months ago, and I'm standing in Sacsayhuaman. I mean, Pumapunku is mind-blowing enough, but standing there, and I interviewed him on camera, and I said, now, no limits. If you could do anything in the world, what would you do? And he goes, you know what, Jimmy? You know what I would do? I would dig here. And I go, where? And he goes, right below our feet, right here at Sacsayhuaman. I said, really? He said, right. I want to know what's underneath our feet. There must be some explanation on how this was done. And maybe there's another city underneath here. Maybe there's something else. Maybe there's dwellings. Maybe there's writings. Maybe there's tools. Maybe there's evidence on how. But this is where I would dig, because I think that this is one of the most significant sites in the world. And he's right.
He is right.
And you're right. Right? We can go and look at Sacsayhuaman. We can look at the Great Pyramid. We can observe it and wonder. At its wonder, I should say, right? We can do all of that, but we don't have any of the answers, right? All we have is what the manufacturing process has been completed, but we don't know anything prior to that. And you know why, Whitley? This is, by the way, everybody, see, Whitley and I are FaceTiming. We're just this is what we do anyway. Okay. Right. So, Whitley, here's a cell phone. All right. Or another example would be, say, a CD player, or just something technical. I'm just looking around the studio for something, and bury that in the ground. And 10,000 years from now, unless you've got an instruction manual, do you really know what this is or how to operate it? Do you know? Would you have any idea what a CD player did, or how it, or what its functions? Would you know? Well, you need an instruction manual. Then, because if you don't have that, what are you doing? You're guessing, right?
Yeah.
Just like we're doing with the Great Pyramid or Gedang Padang. Gadang Padang, I should say, Gedang Padang.
Phnom Penh.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where we're at. And that's why that archaeologist said, I would dig right here, but they won't let us.
And why not? It sounds like one of the best archaeological sites in the world.
It's incredible. When you come up, okay, it's not Baalbek in Lebanon is exactly, you have the same issues there as you do at any megalithic site in the world. It's the same issues. The Romans, when they showed up, just like when they showed up in Egypt, by the way, or when the Spanish showed up in Peru, it's always the same thing. They arrive and they see, but they inherit what they observe. The Romans inherited Baalbek. They built those columns on top of those stones.
Right, exactly. They built the temples on the stones.
On the stones, because it was the ultimate foundation.
Yeah.
You know, a 2,000-ton block, one after another, right? So they built the temples on top of it. But the Romans, they didn't know how they were built, who built them. They just showed up and they were already there. And it happens over and over again around the world because we don't have the owner's manual to go with these sites.
Right. We don't have the owner's manual to go with our past, is what we don't have.
Let me ask you this. I've never asked you this question before. This James Webb Space Telescope situation and what is going on in deep space is potentially a game changer. And about 2 weeks ago, a press release came out from the professional astrophysicists union or whatever, this professional group of astronomers. And the press release was, we need to come up with therapy standards for the astronomers who discover life in the cosmos when they see it through a telescope. And then they gave the reasons why. Because, and then they made this statement, the deeper we look and the more that we look at, the greater our chances of seeing something extraterrestrial. And we're going to have to deal with it as professionals. I thought, man, that's a strange press release. What are they expecting? What do they know? Then we get this announcement from this soap opera from the James Webb Space Telescope, and I find the timing of that suspect. Do you think that there is a galactic trade system that Betty and Barney Hill talked about, right? That there is this complex civilization and structure and urbanization of the cosmos, and we just haven't observed it yet, and it could be right in front of us. Do you think that is something that is not only inevitable, but that we are going to have to deal with?
Something is off, and I'll tell you why. There are an estimated trillion planets in this universe. And getting back to the Fermi paradox, it's too quiet. Even though the Fermi paradox postulates that there's nobody here. In fact, and we know there is somebody here at this point, and has been and was then, but it's so quiet. You would think there'd be thousands, there'd be trade. I mean, the Betty and Barney Hill star map shows one tiny trade route. What if shouldn't it be millions of them? They should be everywhere. We should have been part of that for thousands of years. It should simply be part of the way life is. But it's not. It's too quiet. And if that trade route is any example, it's still too quiet, because they should have had every viable star in the region covered. But no, it's just a few. So you have to wonder, what is the truth? I mean, why is it like this? Could it be that this enormous structure known as the universe, which by the way, speaking of structure, strangely mirrors in its very large scale formations the way the human brain is structured. Is this a desert, Jimmy? It was just a few little species here and there, kind of clinging to a little planet here and there. And you know what I've always thought, that the scariest thing the James Webb Space Telescope could ever find was a planet whose atmosphere was filled with the things like strontium-90, the residue of nuclear bombs. And I've thought to myself, could it be? And they're being very careful about that announcement. It may come out that they've decided, no, that they didn't find life, that they found some indications that there may once have been life, or may in the future be life on that planet, but not now. Or what if they found something like that? Or they found indications of the existence of technology. You know, there's a lot of ways you can find that, and I just don't know what the answer is. Because one thing is clear: if the universe is richly populated with intelligent species, for some reason they don't get here in any numbers.
I look at it a bit differently than that, Whitley, and it's this. You and I have seen strange things, and we are trying to seek those answers. I get that part, but the other side of it is I feel I go back to like the movie Forbidden Planet, when the concept of the id and in invisible things and stuff that is operating at another frequency. It's there, but we just don't see it. And that maybe all around us is a whole nother, just a frequency, a degree off of this reality, exists another reality. Maybe it's dinosaurs, maybe it's ET, I don't know. But that is what is slipping in and out of our reality. And for a second, we are exposed to it and we are able to see it. Just today, this press release came out. Now, I've talked about this a lot on this show and with you in the past. And then we get this press release today, again from the scientific community. I'm going to read part of it to you, Whitley. It's very interesting. It's RUDN University astrophysicists have now proven, this is the press release from AP, have now proven theoretical possibility of the existence of traversable wormholes in the Friedman universe. The Friedman universe is our universe that is expanding. Okay,
I saw that same thing today.
Yeah, you saw it. Now to think about the going back to the Fermi paradox. Where is everybody, and why aren't we seeing evidence looking through a telescope? Why aren't we seeing ships, streaking between stars and so forth? Well, the way that this press release talks about this proof that they have come upon is that it's not only traversable wormholes, but it's wormholes that you can traverse between universes.
That's the interesting part of that, is that a wormhole that you can traverse between universes would be a lot easier to build and less energy intensive than a wormhole that you could build that traverses between the different parts of the same universe.
And they talk about that here. And so, yeah, a wormhole between here and Mars, that's a lot of energy for a short trip, right?
But a wormhole between here and a parallel universe might be much more buildable, ironically, than a wormhole between here and Mars.
Now, doesn't this kind of answer the Fermi paradox in a strange way? It's one of the many answers to the Fermi paradox, but that's one of the reasons. This would be one of the reasons why we don't see the physical movement of not only craft, but that this would also get around the speed of light conundrum.
It's possible. Of course, we do see the physical movement of craft. We see them in our skies all the time. And, I was at the Soul Foundation conference about a month ago now, that was organized by Gary Nolan. And all kinds of leading lights were there and speaking, including one speaker whose name I hope will come to me. It might have been Admiral Keller was his name, but you might be able to help me. Who said that he thought there was evidence of an alien base off of Catalina Island, and he wanted to find out whether or not it was there, because there's a formation under the water there, and Carolyn Corey's documentary about that area showed things coming in and out of the water right around there. So what if what's underwater is a wormhole? What if there's a place there where you can step out of that out of this world into a mirror universe that's right here, that you can literally step across the universes in a wormhole that's under there? Could it be that extraordinary? And could that be the reason that there's no evidence of interstellar travel, because it is in fact impossible, and the only thing we can do is to go between universes, and would therefore be extraordinary limitations as to the amount of as to what we could do in other universes. In other words, we haven't really thought much about this, and there's not much speculative physics even about it. I mean, real physics that discusses how we may be able to function in a universe in which we don't exist. But is it possible to simulate existence? And if so, how do you do that? It's a real question, and it could explain why these bodies are all incomplete and so forth, that they have found in various crash sites. And also it could explain all the crashes, because it might be very hard to maintain your presence in a universe that has a completely different physics from your own. These are fascinating ideas, but there has to be some reason why the Fermi paradox could be right and wrong at the same time. Mm-hmm. Right, that there's nobody here, and wrong that the universe is actually teeming with life, with intelligent life.
But the question always arises when we have these discussions and go through these ideas. Yes, right, but no. Right? Wait, hold on. That's where it's because every time that we come up, we're moving the ideas forward. Off of that, it's like roots on a tree, right? Off of that, more branches are coming off of that. And we have to spend time on each little idea, because I would stop right there and go, wait a minute. A lot is explained with what you just said. If we just stop and think about how many, including myself, Whitley, how many witnesses have seen something completely extraordinary, insane in the sky for a second or two. that it is that not only does that we got to bring forward immediately the ideas of channeling and communication and entanglement. All of these things are tied together, and it's like, we step back and we want to argue about or say, well, you have to overcome the speed of light. The distances are too great. Well, the distance is not the issue. They're doing it because it's friggin' easy. They're not doing it because they got to spend 1 million years in a little tiny flying saucer. How many of these craft, Whitley, have witnesses talked about a bedroom or a kitchen
or a single bit of decoration of any kind?
Decoration, right?
None.
Right. None.
Because they're purpose-built machines. That's why.
And they're only on them for a couple of seconds.
Well, when I was on one myself, I thought I was in a tent. It was very plain. I mean, it didn't occur to me that I might have been in a UFO for weeks after it happened, because I didn't think about aliens and anything like that. I didn't think about that. It wasn't wasn't one of my expectations at all. So I thought I had been in a tent, and that was what it looked like. It was not. It was a messy little room that was shaped kind of like a tent. Actually, it was sort of, and there was a door in it that had a black porthole. It was kind of creepy, but it was very flimsy.
So when you say tent, Bedouin or
no, it looked like a tent with ribbed, like
circus
ribbed. It was arch shape, and it had ribs, and it looked like a tent. It looked like it wasn't fancy. It was just completely there was nothing in it that suggested any kind of decoration whatsoever. Nothing.
And when you say tent, what comes to mind is cloth. Did the walls?
I would have, if you'd asked me, I would have said the walls looked to me like canvas.
Yeah. Wow. Fascinating.
Yeah.
We hear. I don't want to get into this. I'll get into this more. I can certainly do this with you off of the air. But so I was just regressed, and in this regression, Whitley, we went into it without any goals. Like, I need to find out about my childhood. I need to find out about this thing. I need to I need to quit smoking. I need to lose weight. Whatever it is, whatever. No, none of that. It was just, we got a blank canvas here. Let's roll the cameras and let's see what happens. All right. Now, you have to go and watch the TV show, and we'll talk more about this. I'm talking to the audience on Thursday with Sarah Breskman-Cosme, who did the regression. But I had difficulty in describing, I don't want to give too much away here, situations that were around me, like you're saying here, and I it was fuzzy to me. The atmosphere, the like this room that I'm sitting in here, if I was to describe it, everything was, you could see it, but it was out of focus. And that was my way of, and you know what that says to me in a weird way? That it was like maybe a frequency issue. You know what I mean? That I wasn't completely dialed into whatever time, space that this environment that I was in was operating on. That's the only way I could explain it. Like it was just like I could see it, but everything was fuzzy around the edges and vibrating. Does that make sense? Have you ever heard anything like that?
Yeah, I have. I've had a few out of body experiences, and one of them, things had like a magnetic field around them. Everything did that you could see. So, are you saying you might have been out of your body or not knowing it?
I don't want to. I'll tell you off of the air. I'll tell you off the air, and I'll tell you what. I'll make you a deal. Okay.
All right.
I'll come on Dreamland. I'll come on your show, and you can ask me anything, and I'll tell you.
Be careful, Jimmy. I'm gonna get you.
All right. So, and that way, so I'll get past Thursday's show. The current episode is airing on TV right now, and I want people to. I don't want to contaminate people's expectations. So, go and check it out. Go and see it, and then I'll discuss more on Thursday, and then I'll come on your show and you just ask me anything, and I'll answer anything. Fair enough.
Okay,
deal.
Fair enough. We'll do it.
I'm gonna okay. Everybody, Whitley obviously is coming to us tonight from a secret location, and I'm gonna blow. I'm gonna blow through the commercial tonight. Whitley, I'll tell you what. I'll make you a deal. I know that you're at a special place right now, so I'm going to keep you for another 20-25 minutes, and then I'll let you go. Then I'll break to commercial, and then I'll chat in the chat room with everybody. How's that? Can we just?
That's fine. I'll stay if you want me to stay, Jimmy. I'll be glad to.
Okay. So back to this. These ideas of not only communication, but the repeated messages and ideas that have been relayed to us to think about our very existence and our future have been repeated and repeated and repeated. The skeptics will say that's because people are hearing this in a movie. They watched, too many B movies from the 50s and The Day the Earth Stood Still, and it's that story being repeated. And then the other side is, well, maybe it's because it's true. And we do need to look at this planet, and we do need to look at how we treat each other, and we do need to think about our future, that these are bigger questions than the skeptics are trying to take the easy way out on this. And both could be true. But I would think that millions of people don't have a deep psychosis. Right, that's the part that I'm pretty comfortable with. That I just don't think that there is this disease of the mind that is forcing people to make this stuff up.
Of course not. They're not making it up. If the letters that Anne saved that are at Rice now, if you read those letters, it's obvious they're not making it up. Because, if they were making it up, their letters would all be versions of my story. But instead, their letters are beyond belief. They're not if they were making them up, then every letter writer is a story genius. Because these are most of these are absolutely novel stories, unlike any stories we tell each other. They are stories that come from connecting with and interacting with something that has a different view and vision of the world than we do. And that is what they are. And there's just no way to get around it. In order to reject them, what you have to do is not read them. You have to assume that your theory is right, and therefore you don't need to explore the truth. In them, I take 11 of those letters and I analyze each one deeply. And you know what those letters are? Well, one of them I call excuse me, I've got plenty of allergies tonight. I titled this part of the book Call of the Morlocks. And what it is this. Back when I was just writing Communion, and I was beginning to tell friends about what had happened to me, one friend said, well, you know, I have a cousin who is very into this stuff because he had a really strange experience. And he's a psychologist, and I want you to meet him. And so I did meet him. And here is his story. Now, he was driving on the Grand Central Parkway in New York, which is beside LaGuardia Airport during rush hour at night. And in the winter, and it was like 5:30 in the evening. It was totally dark. And, you know, this is a crowded place. This is not. And he notices two things happen. First, a plane comes over very low, and it looks like it's landing on the road. And he thinks, oh my God, it's mistaken the highway for the runway. There's going to be a catastrophe. He thought it was going to land on his car. But as it went over, he said, I realized it was fake. It wasn't a real plane. And as my eyes came down and went back to the road, I glimpsed out of the corner of my eye this signboard on the roadside, which had these strange symbols going across it that were like the old, Times Square news thing where it was made of lights and the news stories would go racing past in the lights. But this wasn't news stories. These were strange symbols. So he thinks, what in the world? And he's pretty rattled. So he pulls over to the side of the road and he wants to get a better look at this signboard. He also wants to stop because this thing that went overhead scared the dickens out of him. He gets out of the car and he's standing there on the roadside and he sees some people. He sees people standing in a circle not far up the way on the shoulder. So he walks over to them. And while he's walking over to them, the short, stocky, very tough, very weird looking person comes up to him and looks up at him and says, get out of here. This scares the hell out of him. He gets back in his car and drives on. Okay. Now, this man is a psychologist. He is a specialist in perception who himself has exquisite vision. His vision is so good he can see the moons of Jupiter. So this is not a person who's likely to have a hallucination or make ridiculous visual mistakes. This is part one of the story. Part two of the story is a letter we get from someone who witnessed the same thing from a slightly different place. And who got out of his car and saw the other guy's car and the other guy walking up to these people. And when he started to walk up to them, he either, I forget whether he heard in his head or was told that if he didn't get out of there, they were going to hurt him. Not the people, but the beings were going to hurt him. And these people were all standing in a circle with their heads down. And they said nothing. So now, why is it called Call of the Morlocks? Think about the movie The Time Machine, and the book The Time Machine, the H.G. Wells story. He goes way forward in time, all the way to the end of the future, and he finds a world that has long since been destroyed by nuclear war. And there are the Eloi and the Morlocks. The Eloi live on the surface, and they are given food. Everything is perfect for them. They have wonderful lives until the Morlocks call them, and they have to go underground, where they are cannibalized, eaten by the Morlocks, who are disfigured human beings who have been distorted by exposure to too much radiation. Are we dealing with the Morlocks? Is that what this is all about in the end? And that's why we can never fully understand them, like the Eloid never fully understand them, or the cattle in the barnyard never realize where they're going to go. And was Charles Fort therefore right when he called this a barnyard? Is this where we are? And is that why the universe is so silent, as we were talking about earlier? Mm-hmm. Not because it's not there, but because we are kept in isolation from it by those who would feed on us. And what do they take? What food do they take? Well, it's obviously not the body, so it must be the soul, if this is a true thing.
Do you remember?
Won't hear too many people say that.
Yeah, right. Do you remember?
It's a speculation, folks.
Do you remember? It was you, myself, William Henry, Dolan, and Linda.
Yeah, in that documentary.
Yeah, we were all sitting in a circle, and we talked for like 3 or 4 hours. Remember that?
Right. Yes, I do remember.
And this was part of the conversation. What was great about that is everybody, we all had our own thoughts and takes on this about the soul and is that the precious commodity here, and it was, and we spent some time on that.
Yeah, we did.
Everybody had their own take, and it was it's something to think about. And here, there's another. Check this out. It's like another missing piece to the puzzle, but it's Sitchin and Lloyd Pye, and not for what you think, but Lloyd, who I miss, Lloyd and Sitchin, but Lloyd said this one thing out of many, but that the history is going to show that our community is on the right side of it. And that when we go back, and now science is supporting what Lloyd and Sitchin started to bring forward, which is this, that our DNA was altered between 200,000 and 300,000 years ago. We had a pair of chromosomes that was removed, took us from 48 to 46 pair. I talked about that earlier. But that timeline and that interruption that we're talking about here, and you mentioned this earlier, about the possibility of this happening to our DNA. Well, Darwin himself was looking for the missing link. And the science has always looked for that. But the other part that an anthropologist will tell you is that Homo sapiens sapien is 200,000 years old.
Yes.
The coincidence of all of this being the same, and the interference that the Anunnaki or any ET race would have had with us, with total indifference to our emotions or what they were doing to us, like cattle, as you just referenced, right? That's kind of where we are today. And this is something that Sitchin and Lloyd Pye were screaming from the mountaintops about 20, 30, 40 years ago.
And you know, there's another side to this coin. In my life, I have gone from having really a hell of a time with this to having, this is by far the loveliest and most important thing in my life is my relationship with whatever this is. And it is ongoing and vividly alive right now. The last time I had any contact with them, I could say Over the past month, I've had 50 or so experiences. It's my life now, my life. And mostly it's not physical, but that's not always the case. And when it is physical, it's very brief, and there are these little beings that I don't see. Usually it's at night, and always odd things. They show up very briefly and in odd places. Let me put it that way. But the non-physical part of it is very organized and very useful. And I frankly think that it's not aliens I'm in touch with at all. I think it's us. I think it's human souls. I think it's the dead, and maybe some people who are living who have very special and well hidden secret knowledge, and who don't live as we do, who live in a very different way and are in effect alive and dead at the same time, that they can move freely between the worlds. And I find from this level of my life experience a beautiful, supportive, friendly, humorous, and quite comfortable relationship. And then there's the other side, the darker side of it, which is there too. So where are we with all of this? Are we really talking about aliens at all? And when we talk about the past, are we talking about entities that came here and did this to us? Or is it that we forgot something about ourselves? Or, well, take the past. 30,000 years ago, there was a supernova occurred. And the world was, parts of the earth were sheeted with gamma rays. We know this because there's a strip of crosses Australia and parts of Southeast Asia, and then goes on down into the Antarctic, where all of the large animals that lived outdoors disappeared. That's when all of the large giant marsupials disappeared in Australia. And the reason was they were irradiated and died, killed by gamma rays. The human beings who lived there saw that there was an extra sun in the sky, and that scared the hell out of them. They went into caves. But the big marsupials didn't know how to do that, and so they went extinct. And the smaller ones lived in caves anyway, so they were spared as well, lived in tunnels and burrows. So did that change our DNA somehow? And if so, was there some larger level of manipulation going on? In other words, is this whole place designed not just 30,000 years ago or 200,000 years ago, but look at the solar system itself. Look at the way the Earth is so perfectly positioned. It's like a planet that was designed to live, to come to life. And the big gas giants prevent most of the cosmic debris from coming and hitting Earth. And then the moon cleans up the immediate environment. That's why when you look up at the moon, you see all those craters. Those are things that didn't hit Earth. And why is it so perfectly positioned, like a work of art? When there's an eclipse, it's perfectly positioned to precisely blot out the sun. Is someone trying to tell us something?
Right.
Trying to say, hey guys, face it, it's a designed place.
Yeah,
And
yeah. Nature's good. Nature's good. It ain't that good.
Well, that might be true. I had a friend,
right.
He's passed on, who was a statistician, and we played around with the statistical probability of the solar system working out like this. And we just played around with it because without any other samples to play with, and this was before we'd found other planets, it was only basically like the Fermi paradox, basically guesswork, or the Drake equation, basically guesswork, which is the equation of how many intelligent species there may be in the universe. With a sample of one, you can't really know. You can just play around with it. And that's what we did. We played around with it. But the statistical probability of this being the way it is by just chance is enormous, highly unlikely. If you take the moon out of the equation, then it's a different story. The planet there could be millions and millions of solar systems like this. But when you put the moon into the equation and you put the Earth in exactly the place it is in relation to the sun, and the moon is exactly the place it is in relation to the Earth, any closer and it would have fallen into the Earth, any farther away and it would have drifted off. And it slows the rotational wind. If there was no moon here, there would be no higher life forms here either, because there would be a wind blowing almost continuously across the planet at about 1,000 miles an hour. The moon follows the Earth and retards that wind. That's why we have tides. That's why we don't have a continuous wind. The moon and Earth together are a life-creating system. A system. It's a machine, damn it.
But yes. And so statistically, if we start to play the numbers game, then if we look at all of the planets just in our solar system, where you've got, so we have Earth, sample of 1. That's a really good point. Okay, so how many other planets in our star system also have moons? Well, all of them. And some of them are bigger than Earth. So you heard the size, it's certainly much bigger than our own moon. And I don't know what the last count is with Saturn and Jupiter, but between the two of them, what do they got? 150? And some of them may have life. Some of them have water. So statistically, if we take that out into the universe, we used to think that Earth was and our star system were the only planets. Now we know that every star has at least one planet. So statistically, we're talking about trillions upon trillions upon trillions to the power of a trillion, right?
Yeah, we didn't know that at the time.
We didn't know that.
We played with this. No. So we didn't know it.
So statistically, there are duplicates of us, not to the infinite, but it's a pretty damn big number, Whitley.
There are really two possibilities here. One is this is a designed life machine. Somebody designed the solar system and built it, or at least this planet and its moon. They put it here somehow, or it's chance. And because the universe is so huge, it could be chance. It didn't look like in those days as much as it does now. I wish someone would run that same thing again, and because I think what you would find is, if it's chance, it means that there is just a scattering of life-bearing planets in the universe. I mean, bearing higher life forms. There might be lower life forms everywhere. We're probably going to find them in this solar system eventually. There's even some evidence that there may be some life on Mars. But it's not higher life forms, not complex life forms. That takes an incubator, which is what Earth is. And if that's the case, then it explains why there's the Fermi paradox is the way it is. The silence would be simply because we're so rare. Rare.
Here. Okay, so why do I think you were there? Were you at dinner with Avi Loeb and I?
God knows. I've been at dinner with a lot of people.
Okay,
where? What was the context?
Okay. But at this dinner, so Avi says to me, I swore you were sitting there. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It's
highly likely. I don't remember it, but it's highly
Whitley,
likely.
It's a fond memory of mine. So let's not kill it. Let's just leave it right there.
Okay, so we'll say I was there.
You're there. But Avi said, he corrects me. We're talking numbers and things. And he says, no. Just in our Milky Way, there are over 50 billion rocky Earth-like planets with water in the Goldilocks zone.
But how does he know that?
It's Avi Loeb. I'm not going to question it. Okay, so let's just go with. So when we stop and think about that, that incubator part that you're talking about, there's a lot of what did we call those things we used to have at our house? Terrariums. Do they still have those? They were
I think my brother's got a terrarium, in fact.
Really? Remember, everybody had one in 1975. So
right.
we all had. But the thing is, there's 50 billion of those. So yeah, I don't. And when we back off, there is at the beginning of, I think it's is it Contact? I think it's the beginning of the movie Contact when they back off of Earth, right? And the camera zooms out, and then it zooms out of our solar system, and then it zooms out of the Milky Way, and then the Milky Way turns into a star, right? And then all these galaxies are rushing by, and that puts it all into focus right there. That we're just that little, that famous quote that our sun is a grain of sand on all of the beaches and all of the deserts on planet Earth.
But you know something? Compared to stars in this universe, grains of sand are rare. Think about that. There are so many more stars than grains of sand. The grains of sand are rare. It's awesome, isn't it?
Isn't that right back to our point about the primates, right? That what separates us, right? The story, the ability to have these conversations and to talk about this stuff. Now I'm sure that if I had a dog right now and we were talking smack like we're talking right now, my dog would be over there going, dude, I understand everything that you're talking about.
I have often wondered that.
Yeah.
I'm at the house of some friends, and they've got coyotes around here. And there was a big pack of coyotes across the road a couple nights ago. And listening to them, their language was so complex. I thought to myself, we just think they're making noise, and that's only because we don't understand their language.
Yeah,
because those cats were talking, no question in my mind about it.
They think we don't know about the speed of light.
Yeah. Who knows what they were talking about?
Today, Whitley, this is, you can't make this stuff up. Today, I'm on my Harley, and I'm about 50 miles out into the desert, into the Mojave. You know where I live. It's desert.
I know, exactly.
Right. So I'm 50 miles. I just went in one direction, right? And I'm out in the middle of when I say nowhere, there's nothing there. And I'm buzzing along, just, in my own thoughts. And I see up ahead something run across the road. And it was big. I went, wow, it's kind of strange out here in the middle of nowhere. And I kind of look around. There's no houses. It's the desert. It's just open, right? So I kind of slowed down. I don't want to hit it if it decided to cross the street again. I was doing like 70 miles an hour. I bring it down to about 35, and I'm keeping my eyes open. And do you know what it was? In the middle of, when I say nowhere, Whitley, nowhere. It was a husky, and he was sitting on his back, like beautiful dog, beautiful, and a chihuahua. Right?
Oh my God.
in the middle of nowhere. And I slowed down and I said, check you two out. And they were just doing their thing. And so I slowed down. I said, are they lost? Are they this? And I'm looking around. There's nothing. No, I'm serious about this. There's nothing. And this is what I thought. Best friends, those two, right? And they've got it all figured out. They didn't look hungry. They didn't look mad. They looked happy. And it was just this weird thing. And this husky watched me watch him. Just that was it. I kept driving. It was like, it was like a Carlos Castaneda. It was a page out of a Carlos Castaneda book. I swear. It was just this bizarre moment where we connected. We looked at each other's eyes, and I kept on going. It was bizarre.
2 different stories passing in the night.
It was, man. It was. It was absolutely amazing. But yeah, the idea that that we could be the only species on this planet that thinks and communicates this way, right? The element of the story comes into play.
But Jimmy, if there is a species on this planet that in fact is superior to us intellectually, as much as we are superior, say, to the chimpanzees, we might not even be able to perceive its existence. We might not be able to. They might be right here and we don't know it. And I can never forget the fact that when we were having people up to the cabin, the old cabin in upstate New York, where we used to see the visitors, people would come. We'd bring people up to the cabin, and they would come. The visitors would show up. I mean, some of those people are still around. Raven Dana, for example, was there and had that happen. And Laurie Barnes, who's passed on, talked about it many, many times on the air. So there were witnesses who spoke about what happened to them. Annie Gottlieb and Jacques Sandolescu. Now, what if, and they would come up, you could smell them. When I was at having the experience with them in the craft, there was a smell of cinnamon. Nothing like what we smelled later. But later, when they were coming up to the cabin, they would smell like the forest floor, which is pungent. If you dig down into the leaves on the forest floor a foot or so, you get a real pungency because there's decaying vegetation.
Yeah.
Exactly, and they would smell like they came from underground. They would smell musty and like underground, and then there are those mummies down in where is it? Peru. And by the way, there's a lot of stuff going on the internet about the mummies, and let me just clear it up for a couple of seconds. I've been involved with this for a couple of years, actually 4 or 5 years. The mummies that were brought illegally, by the way, apparently to Mexico, I'm not sure, but apparently they are constructions. They're not alien bodies at all. But the thing about them is they're constructed at an astonishingly high level of craftsmanship, and it looks as if there's been some carbon dating of them that was done earlier in Peru before they were taken out to Mexico. They're about 1,000 years old. So who in the world 1,000 years ago was building them and why creating them? But they are definitely made of human teeth and the bones of children and animals. They're not. But there are other mummies there that are not explainable. And those are the ones that I suspect the U.S. government is trying to get the Peruvian government to confiscate. Those are the ones that are at the Ica Museum, Ica University.
Yeah,
now,
I've been there and I've seen them, and the Ica Museum didn't until this year, by the way, for the first time. You can now shoot video and take pictures in there. That was never allowed before.
That's right. It wasn't.
Yeah.
But anyway, here's my point. If they exist and are a higher life, are more intelligent than we are, we might not even know they're here, that they're still here. And what we might be seeing is not creatures from other worlds at all, but creatures that are from here, that are part of Earth. And they might be getting into our lives because they're riled up about the fact that we may blow the planet up, and they don't want to be blown up because they're here, they live here too. And they're highly intelligent and capable of controlling the way we perceive them with their minds, and they certainly can use mind control. I've had that experience with them. We would not know they're even here. We wouldn't know. How would we know? We would only know what they let us know. A troop of chimpanzees living in the forest, is in the jungle, is not going to know a thing about us unless we show ourselves. And even when we show ourselves, they will not be able to understand anything about us. They won't be able to understand what a needle and thread are, let alone an automobile. Mm-hmm. And if these beings are exponentially farther ahead, as far ahead of us as we are of the chimps, we're not going to be able to understand them. We won't be able to understand them.
Now, what do we do, Whitley? And I do, before we do run out of time, I would like to know what you're talking about at the Conscious Life Expo. And you and I are going to be hanging out all weekend. We've got events that we're doing together, and I'm very excited about all of that. But the other part of this is that I saw a mummy in Peru, a year and a half old, right? About a foot and a half long, but no legs. I only saw from the base of the spine and to the skull and the arms and the ribs. Legs were not there. But anyway, year and a half old, fully developed skull. I've got pictures. I can show to you now. I'll show to you offline the way you would have to look.
How do you know it was a year and a half old?
It's been well studied. This has been around for about 40 years. And I met the anthropologist that discovered this mummy. He's around 80 years old now. Anyway, the Peruvian government sued him for possession of this mummy, and he won. So therefore, he is in possession of it legally. Anyway, the skull is about the size of a potato. It's about this big. When you look at and it's elongated, but it's got full adult molars. You look at the pictures and you're like, what? And you think when you look at these pictures that this is a giant, that this is a normal size human skull. It's not. It's only this big. And it's got 10 ribs, not 12. It's a very strange thing to look at. But it was alive. Adult molars. It's a year and a half old. Adult, big teeth. These teeth, big ones. And you look, and it's just like, wait a minute here. So I've got two doctors that were with me. One was a surgeon, a GI, a gastrosurgeon, and the other one was an emergency room, the head of emergency department, emergency doctor. Okay? Full on 10 years of med school, both of them. And they're looking at this, and to see all of those years of medical school go out the window, right? Because they don't know what they're looking at.
Yeah, I'll bet.
They were just like, what? They can count ribs. And these ribs go up. They don't go down like you know what I mean? Like ours.
Yeah.
These go like this. It's crazy to look at. Anyway, this was alive. And so
it was once alive. It wasn't alive when you were looking at it.
No. And there's dating on this, and again, it's like 1,200 years, something like that, old. But it's just strange. So the eye sockets. Okay, so I don't want to pull up the image, but if you have, this is a good example. This is a wireless. Oh man, I think I just turned off our show.
I can still hear you.
No, on another feed. Oh well, it's no big deal. No big deal. Anyway, I did it because I picked up this wireless mouse and I clicked on it. So imagine this is the head. It's about that big, but the eye sockets that are on it are normal size. It's the craziest thing. You're looking at this.
So the eye sockets would be huge in a head.
They're like this, right? But the head is only this big. It's crazy.
Well, here's a speculation for you. Maybe someone was experimenting genetically a long time ago.
Yeah, of course.
Maybe it's the result of a genetic experiment conducted by the same people who built places like Sacsayhuaman.
I asked both of these doctors, I said, is there any genetic, is there any disease? Is there anything that would cause this? And these are, now I did the interviews independent. They didn't hear each other. Both of them gave the same, no, nothing. There's nothing that would explain this. It was, and they both, you know what else they said? What we are looking at is the way it's supposed to be. That's a fully formed, this is a species. This isn't some abnormality. This isn't some defect. This isn't anything like that. No, this is what it is. And it's perfect too. It's
absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
You get around, Jimmy. I hear you're in Egypt one day and in Peru the next.
Well, it's because I'm trying to be you, Whitley. I'm doing my best.
I'm going to India.
When are you going?
Next week, on Monday.
And what are your plans?
I'm going to go with members of my family, and I'm going to go to Varanasi, Jaipur, and the Buddhist sites as well. So we're going to see some of the historical sites, and we're going to see the capital of Hinduism, which is Varanasi, and we're going to see the Bodhi tree where Buddha sat under. Admittedly, the Bodhi tree was moved to Sri Lanka, but a cutting of it was brought back, and it's in the place where he originally sat. So we're going to see all of that, and we're going to go down to the tiger reserve and see if we can see some tigers, things like that.
You know what's so fascinating, and I love my country. I love the United States. Okay, I'm not saying anything negative, but what I enjoy is getting out there and seeing cultures that have existed and thrived for so long. And you know, to think about Egypt and the age of Egypt, and you go to the Amare or you know, Incas were just in Peru for a short period of time, but there's been a continuous existence there for tens of thousands of years. And it's the same thing in India. India just may be the oldest continuous civilization on the planet. You can look at China.
Well, they think that Varanasi is the oldest continually inhabited city in the world.
Period.
Okay. Yeah, period. But
Yeah.
you say I like to travel too, but I have to tell you, I'm always absolutely thrilled to come home. This is the most wonderful country, and it is so filled with variety, and it's so beautifully organized. When you go to other places in the world and they're disorganized and confusing and full of pickpockets and whatnot, you come home and it's not like that anymore. And this country, I mean, we sent our guys out in World War I and World War II to die for freedom. We're the only country that did that. And then after World War II, we didn't beat up the people who were forced to surrender. We made them whole again, and we taught them how to be free. It's the only country in the world that's ever done anything like that. It's a marvelous country.
Yeah, I gotta say, I will say this. I don't care if it's Mexico City, if it's Lima, if it's Cairo, even London, right? Organized chaos. Solid.
Well, London.
Organized chaos.
You ever tried to drive in London?
I have. Okay, this is the short answer is yes. Very briefly, I talked somebody into letting me drive their car. I just wanted to do that. I can't say who because of the situation that we were in, so I can't go there. But my observation of London is the same as Cairo, or like I said, Mexico City. Organized chaos. Do you know in Cairo, 30 million people, right? It is so massive. Not one street light. In Cairo.
That's like ancient Rome.
No street lights. No lines on the road. Right? Now, and you
there's
look
street lights and lines on the roads in London.
Yeah, there is. It is, but it's just weird that everybody is moving, right? The city, it's organized chaos. It's organized chaos.
But in London, the two things that I enjoy about the streets of London, moving around in them, are the black cabs and buses, because the skill of these drivers is awesome. These bus drivers can take these huge buses around in that chaos, and they always end up where they're supposed to be, and they don't ever hit anybody or have any wrecks.
I've said this so many times. Anybody that drives in Cairo can drive for Formula One. Period.
Well, that's apparently true of India too.
Yeah.
I don't intend to drive there. I don't drive in England. I've driven in England a couple times, and it doesn't work for me. I'm not going to be able to drive on the left. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, when you went and wrote your book there last year, a year before, you were there for a few months. I was just there for about 10 days 6 months ago, and coming back after being on the wrong side of the road for 10 days, you get acclimated pretty quickly to it. It was pretty strange. Anyway, came back to the United States, and it actually felt weird being on the right-hand side of the road. It did feel different to me. What are you going to be speaking about at Conscious Life Expo this time around?
I'm going to be going deeply into them and into some of I'm going to be, among other things, I'm going to show some video, very unusual video, including some video I don't think seen too much, but more importantly, I'm going to be talking about exactly what's in that video and what it means, and it's a fairly surprising talk. I think I'm hoping that it'll be well attended, and I'm sure it will. So I've got a lot to say about this stuff at this point in my life. I've been living with this now for so long, and not just living with it passively. I'm engaged with it. It's part of my life. And I'm going to be analyzing some of the letters, those unbelievable letters that we got, but analyzing them really deeply. So these seemingly incomprehensibly strange things turn out to make a lot of sense. And then I'm going to also go into the military's relationship with this, which I know a lot about. I mean, I come from a family who was, after all, involved in the Roswell incident from the get-go. And so I know a lot, and I'm going to be talking about that. I am not going to be disclosing any secrets. I'm not aware of the fact that I know any. Actually, I say that, and then I think to myself, well, maybe I am, because maybe I don't know some things I know are secret, but nobody's ever told me not to, so I'll talk about what I want to talk about.
We're going to be, you've got a couple of panels. You got the UFO panel, and then you're going to come down and also do my disclosure lunch.
Yeah, that's right. On Sunday.
And when we do it's so much fun for me personally, and I'm sure it's got to be the same for you, where you get to just sit and have free thought and conversation with people. Has that changed for you over the years?
I love that. Listen, you couldn't do this if you didn't like people. I started out in life wanting to be, I was pretty much of a hermit, and I thought one of the reasons I wanted to be a writer is a writer works alone. And then I published my first novel and ended up on this big author tour for the Wolfen. And I thought, actually, I like this. I like meeting people. I love meeting people, actually. I'm a people person, so no problem for me.
If you go, I'll just let everybody know that's watching this. If you go to consciouslifeexpo.com and you go through, you can get tickets for Whitley's presentation and discussion for them, his new book. By the way, everybody loves the book. That, it's got to make you, just feel pretty damn good that the reviews are in, and the reception has been extraordinary about the book.
It has been. Yeah, there has been a tremendously good reaction to them. And I'm working on a new book about the difference between our minds and their minds. And that'll be an interesting thing, too, because you'd be amazed at how much we can figure out about their minds if we're careful. And if we really, don't, you start out and you're going to think, you think to yourself, if I make no assumptions at all, what can I find? And it turns out you can find out the truth that way.
Our disclosure lunch, and this is, talking about the, mingling. When you go to the Conscious Life Expo, we just posted up in the chat. There's a link there. We've got myself, of course, Linda Moulton Howe, Danny Sheehan, Nick Pope, Andrew Collins is coming.
Oh, wonderful! And,
it's going to be great. Steve Bassett, Caroline Corey, and yourself. And so and how we've got this all laid out is that we are seating everybody at a table. So Willie's going to have his own table that he right, and I'm going to be up front with a few guests that are going to be there for the lunch, that are going to eat with me, and we're all just going to sit and talk. And we've got a few special things that we're going to do, but this only happens at the Conscious Life Expo, Whitley, and thank you for being a part of it. And I mean, to have you and Linda and Nick and Danny and Andrew and Bassett, Caroline Corey, all in a very intimate setting, having lunch and hanging out with everybody is really, really cool. I just want to thank you for that. And you've got the UFO.
Well, it's going to be fun.
You're the best, Whitley. Now, you're always writing. Okay.
Yeah.
Is this a process? I want to know when the next book is going to come out. But is this a process? I ask you that every single time I'm on the Whitley. When? But is this a process that's easy for you now? Or is it still something that you've got to work at? I remember 2 years when you called me up. I'm throwing you under the bus. You called me up. You go, Jimmy, I can't write here. I'm going to England. I go like, when? Yeah. Tomorrow. What? How long are you going to be? When the book is done. But you know what I mean? You've got to figure out a way to get it done. Is it always like that?
It's always hard. Every day is a blank page, and it's hard. I wouldn't even consider writing a book that wasn't hard for me to write. When I get a good idea, when I think to myself, well, this is impossible. I can't do this. I know I have a book. And that's where I am right now. I'm writing a book about the inner workings of the mind of somebody we've never met. But we have met them. We know them well. We know them very well. And if you're careful and you, as I say, you put aside all of the assumptions, then you can figure a lot of things out.
Have a great trip with your family in India, and give me a call when you get back. Whitley, we love you, and I'll see you. Check this out, Whitley.
Couple weeks.
2 weeks. Conscious Life Expo right here in Los Angeles, California. Thank you, Whitley. Safe travels to India, and I'll see you when you get back. Lunch is on me.
Okay, you've got a date.
Thank you, Whitley. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, sir. Bye now.
The absolute very best. Unknowncountry.com is right there. The links are there, and also on our website and throughout social media. And what a perfect conversation tonight. Again, what was so great about tonight, and I do want to stress this, is that this was just a conversation. I was FaceTiming with Whitley, and you were hanging out right here with us. And that was just a perfect night on the show. Thank you so much, Whitley. And you can get your tickets over at consciouslifeexpo.com. And the disclosure lunch is right there. Whitley's right there. Everything you need is at consciouslifeexpo.com. What are we doing tomorrow night on the show? What's tomorrow? Oh, William Henry is with us tomorrow night. We're talking about artificial intelligence and human ascension. All of that tomorrow night. So I'll see you tomorrow night. Fade to Black is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee Newman, and Michelle Freed. Thank you to Dennis and Kevin. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Jonaside. Music is Doug Aldrich. Intro, Spaceboy, spaceboymusic.com. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network, and this broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2024 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black of the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Until tomorrow night with William Henry, I want you to be safe. Go Backley Tappy.